Barbara Mojica, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, actually. It's weather's a little bit cold where I'm at, but we're doing pretty good. So I wanted to have you on today because you've wrote some history books for children. It's Little Miss History. Can you tell us a little bit about those books?
Okay, well, Little Miss History is a cartoon character who narrates my set of nonfiction, critical thinking books. The books are intended not only to educate, but to entertain and inspire children to learn more about people, places, and events. And my hope is that by understanding the past, they will be able to understand where we are today and hopefully create a legacy for the future by adapting these tools to our situation today.
I can certainly respect that. I think it's really important to understand where we came from, to understand where we are, essentially. And I think it's some of these books highlight like Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, and how the Statue of Liberty came to be. And I like that poster behind you with Little Miss History impersonating Uncle Sam. That's pretty neat too.
Yeah.
And that Uncle Sam is a very important part of our history. And I think it's fantastic that you wanted to teach children, where we come from and why things are the way they are and how they got there. I think
Well,
that's
what's the kid's first question, right? I mean, when kids are little, they want to know who, what, when, where, and why. So, uh, we start with our family. And, at first they want to know all about their family, who their parents are, what their customs are, why they do the things they do, why they dress the way they dress, why they eat the foods they eat, why they participate in community activities like religious groups. Why are people at school sometimes the same and sometimes different? It just kind of blossoms out from the family to the local community and schools. And eventually, as the child gets older and older, they become more and more attuned to what is going on with the whole world around them. And of course, today, with social media being almost instantaneous, uh, they are rapidly exposed to an amount of knowledge that we could not even dreamed of when we were little kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was a kid reading encyclopedias to gain
Hmm.
knowledge. And I mean, that was I was actually forced to for punishments. I'd do something wrong and my mom would be like, okay, well, for punishment then you have to read the encyclopedia and give me a book report. And so it kind of made me a little genius. So it was pretty
That
fun.
was a pretty
And
smart trick.
exactly. It was pretty fun for me to dive into some of those subjects later on. And once I was introduced to them, like something as simple as like dinosaurs, that's in the D section of the encyclopedia. And I got into paleontology and learning about dinosaur bones. And that's all history. We're learning about our past and where we come from. And I think what sparked my curiosity in history was learning about all of those things that I learned in the encyclopedias in combination with going and visiting sites of Civil War history and museums and stuff like that. I've always been interested in that stuff. And so, what got you into writing books?
Well, I am a historian by training. My bachelor's and master's degrees are both in history, and I've always loved history from the time I was little. That was, of course, connected with people and places. I didn't travel very much when I was little. My family didn't have um, a substantial income. We didn't even have a car. So I was always longing to get out there and find out about what was out there. But when I finished my degrees in history, I became very much aware that I was not going to be happy being one of those kind of ivory tower people who did research. While that was very satisfying to me, it didn't satisfy that people aspect. So I went into teaching, and as luck would have it, I wound up teaching younger children. And I wound up teaching for 40 years, but that's a long story too. I started out teaching in private school with kids in the general population, and then I became aware that our educational system wasn't meeting the needs of most kids, and they weren't really getting the type of education that fit their best learning style. I went into special education and I went to the other end of the spectrum. I worked with very severely delayed kids. So we're talking about Fragile X, we're talking about autism, we're talking about Downs, um, physical disabilities, the whole gamut. And I worked through that and became more attuned with educators of different types, speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, wound up being the director of a special ed preschool. And that led me into an administration path. So I became an administrator, finding services for kids that had special needs and working in New York City with one of the largest educational systems. So my career kind of also involved all types of education. So what I did is when I retired, I decided I wanted to combine these two loves, my two passions that I had with history and with kids. So I decided to write a series of children's books. And luckily for me, I am married to an artist who suggested that to make the books a lot more entertaining, interesting, I have a character to narrate. So he designed this cartoon character, Little Miss History, who is based on a younger version of me, the person who loved to travel and eventually did get to travel. I've traveled all over the world. But she's this kind of camp hiker. Oh, she wears rose-colored glasses because she has an optimistic view of the world, and she has these huge hiking boots, and the boots are in memory of my father and his big feet. So she's a composite of my early life. So she's a fun character, exaggerated, cartoon-like, but she's the kind of character that I think different types of kids will identify with for different reasons. So she is intended to draw them in to make them feel comfortable and familiar so that when I have questions within my books, and I always have questions with books because they're intended to make the kids critical think. I ask for their opinions and suggestions, and she kind of draws them in and invites them to do that.
I I'm so impressed by the character and the illustrations behind you. That's so neat. And your husband did a wonderful job. And I can't read. I can't wait to read the books with my child. Is there an age group that you would start with this series? Because my son is 5 years old and he's just now learning to read. So I think that'd be a good series for him to get into.
Yes, well, when I am forced to put my books into a category, which, for instance, when you put your books on Amazon, you are forced to do that. Um, I put different ages for different books because I think some interests are more geared to children of different ages. However, uh, the books are picture laden, so and they're multimedia. So the books have the drawings. Uh, my husband also does unique drawings, portraits, that kind of thing. They have photographs because we visit the sites with very few exceptions. For instance, my North Pole book, we have not been there, but we visit the sites and take our own photographs. So we have photographs from the sites. Sometimes we will have a famous photograph that is in the public domain or with permission to really bring that event to life. Uh, so kids, honestly, as young as preschool, have been drawn to the books. I have one young fan who started reading my La Brea Tar Pits book at the age of 4. And he was enamored with fossils and dinosaurs. He still keeps in touch with me and sends me pictures of his exploits. He's now in second grade. So they can be for children as young as 3 or 4. The books kind of grow with the child. So for a younger child, they're intrigued by the pictures and they will get the rudimentary messages of the book. And as they get older, they are drawn more into the critical thinking and the questions and opinions and the nuances. For instance, in my Mount Rushmore book, I talk about Mount Rushmore and I talk about the history. I talk about how it was built, the people who were involved, but I also talk about the Crazy Horse and how the Native Americans protested and started to build their own monument to Crazy Horse. We talk about indigenous rights. We talk about the UN a little bit. We talk about what do they think? Do they think we should have one memorial, two memorials? Books that I have on national parks. Some of them are about national parks, like Sequoia National Park. We get into a lot of science, so it's not just history. It can be geography, it can be science. We talk about the geology of the park. We talk about the animals that live in the park. And then we talk about the environmental issue that Sequoia National Park is the most polluted park in the system, and how the air quality of the valley is sometimes damaged by the trucking industries and so on. Oh, and I tell them, what do you think about the environment? Do you have any solutions? So that's an example, again, of a book that on one level would appeal to a younger child because of the animals
So
and the museum access.
how many books are in the series?
16. There are 16 in the series. The most recent one is Alaska, Journey to the Inside Passage. And I have 2 other books. I have one book called The Adventures of Little Miss History, which I did for teachers. So some teachers in New York kind of approached me with the idea that because I had books about Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, and the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, it would be nice to have them presented together as one issue. So I did a book called The Adventures of Little Miss History, and that has all 3 of those books encompassed within it. And then I have a coloring book, which is a bit more than a coloring book. It's a book of uh, some images from different books and some famous sayings from history for children to think about. So in all told, there are 18, 16 in the Little Miss History Travels to series, then that adventures book and the coloring book.
That's
And the
really
next stop will
interesting.
be Gettysburg.
That'd be a good one there. I was really interested in Civil War history when I was a kid, and I mean, I'm still interested in it quite a bit. But there's, for me, I think World War II is probably my favorite era that I like to learn about right now, currently. And that's because it's more pertinent to my life, I guess. Um, but it's very interesting that you would talk about like traveling because that's another one of those things that I really, really love is traveling and doing things and visiting, all over the United States. I haven't left the country yet, but I do plan to eventually. But so my next question was like when you were a kid, you didn't get to travel around that much. And then
No,
when you got older, you experienced some of the things and you went to some of these historical sites and you took your own pictures. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like and when did you start traveling? Were you in your 20s, 30s?
I started traveling in my 20s. Uh, I started with a 3 week trip to Europe, which encompassed originally the focus of my historical studies was ancient history. So when I first traveled, I was still in graduate school. So I wanted to visit Greece and Rome. So I went on this 3 week tour, which included a 1 week Greek island voyage. So I got to go to Santorini, Delos, Delphi, Mykonos. I got to visit ancient Rome, and I, it was like a dream come true for me. Uh, and I think that that was probably the most memorable trip because traveling has gotten more difficult, obviously, over the years. I know I continued to travel. There was a break there when I had my children, and they were very young and didn't travel abroad as much. But today travel is so much more touristy, and there are so many more people traveling. It's difficult to even see this. So when I went on my first trip over there, I really got in close and got to see things. I recently went back to Italy. I went off season, but you cannot imagine the crowds. I went to Pompeii a long, long time ago when I was in my 20s. Going to Pompeii now is like 40-minute wait just to get through the gate.
Oh, I can just
Now,
imagine. I
while
can just
more is
imagine.
excavated and you actually are seeing more, it it's a different kind of experience. You
I
can't
bet.
really just
I bet I
walk
so
around.
I would love to visit Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe. I would love to go visit Europe and hang out over there. Did you so when you were in your 20s, like you said you'd mentioned Pompeii, did you visit like Turkey? Have you been there?
I've been to Ephesus and Istanbul.
Okay. Okay. The reason why I ask about Turkey is Göbekli Tepe. I'm wondering if you had been there, but obviously, if you've not been to Turkey, you know, but that's one of those places that intrigues me. We're talking about ancient history, and I'm very fascinated by Egypt and
Hmm.
the cultures in Egypt and all around the Middle Eastern states there, and then that combines with Mexico with the Mayans and um, in Turkey they have Göbekli Tepe, and all around the world they're finding these ancient sites. It's pretty fascinating to
It
learn
is.
about. And I
Well,
hope
in Rome, they're almost afraid to dig. Like a lot of tourists have the question, well, why don't you keep excavating? Well, they've excavated so many levels down. They're at the point where if they keep excavating, they're going to damage what they have.
Right. Eventually, they're going to have
So,
to start going out.
but then again, you have sites like in here in Los Angeles, they're building transportation systems and
Yeah.
they're constantly finding fossils.
That's amazing, isn't it? After so many years of being there, I mean, Los Angeles has been there a long, long time,
And
and
you look at La Brea Tar Pits, it's in the middle of the city. I mean, you are on right by Wilshire Boulevard.
right,
You're
right.
surrounded by all of this modern.
And so
Uh,
just talking to you, I can see the passion that you have for history and all these places that you've been, and the photos that you've taken and stuff like that. I can just I can just imagine what the books are like, and I could probably envision the passion that you put into the books. It's so amazing to me that people are not only that interested in history but want to teach children and understand the importance of teaching children history, and not only that but just being good and kind to children to begin with. And teaching is one of those things that I really have a soft spot for teachers, and history teachers in particular. Um, I just, what is it? So what made you want to teach history to children? And like, I think we've went over that a little bit in the beginning, but to expand on it a little bit, did you feel like it was more like a mission that you needed to teach kids more history, or do you think it was just wanting to share your knowledge with the world?
well, I think in the beginning, I was able to share history with kids. And as time went on in my career, history got more and more pushed to the back. History became, quote, social studies, which was more of a combination of history with sociology and maybe a little geography. You're not teaching geography as a subject per se anymore. In elementary school, history is pretty much ignored. It really isn't until high school where, if you, in the states that still have a fairly rigid curriculum, they make room for 1 year of world history, 1 year of American history. And on the elementary level, again, it's considered a minor subject because everything is the teaching to the test. So if you are in any kind of public education under the guidance of a federal curriculum, you are teaching to the test. And that has resulted in a real, I would just come right out and say, decay in our education system. 20 years ago, the States was #1 worldwide in education. Now I think we're down to about 29th. And what we have done is created these artificial standards because these tests aren't even, while they are considered standardized tests, there is no standardized student. So today's student is more multicultural than America has ever been. Uh, they are not, a lot of the children who take these tests are not familiar with the culture of America. Therefore, when you give them a reading passage that mentions something that is very common to them, it's foreign. And the other barrier, of course, is the language because a lot of them are fluent in the language. So uh, our test results have gotten worse, 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 worse. And that goes back to what I said earlier. we don't accommodate our educational system to the child, it's the curriculum. So administration has largely taken over, and teachers no longer have the freedom to adapt their teaching to their particular students in that particular classroom. You're given the curriculum and you're told you will teach this and you will teach it this way. And I had all kinds of battles with administrators when I was at the point where I was particularly in public school. Uh, at the time I was teaching, I had my special ed training and I was teaching a class that was an integrated class. So we had general education and special needs students in one classroom. And I was supposed to be responsible for the special needs students. Well, I'm given this curriculum. I was told that I had to teach it exactly the same way as the general ed teacher. Now, that didn't work with my students. It didn't reach my students. You can't have a whole language program with children that don't even understand how to decode words. You can't tell a child who has special needs or who is an ESL student, turn and talk to your partner about this story because they don't understand the story. How are they going to turn and talk to their partner? So,
Yeah, we talk
it
about
was
that. We
almost
talk about that on the
ludicrous.
podcast all the time. And we do talk about it all the time on how there is a standardized curriculum, but it's just the students aren't standardized, and that's the problem. We talk about, like, I have ADHD. My children have ADHD, and it's a thing. It's becoming more prevalent, I think, with the more screen time that we have as adults and children. It shortens our attention span, so we don't
Oh,
have
for
a very
sure.
large attention span, and they're treating our children as if they are the same as they were 40 years ago or 50 years ago. And as we had mentioned before, we have a whole world of knowledge at our fingertips now. It's the collective knowledge of the world doubles like every couple of years. And it has been for the last 2 decades. So it's a pretty wild thing to see how the public education system hasn't been reformed since the 70s, and we're no
Yes, it's
longer the
almost
same
like the
people.
old factory model is still,
Yes,
is
I
still
talk about
there.
that all the time too. I talk about that all the time. And I actually believe in that way of thinking, that we do need to churn out factory workers. We do. That's what the United States, that's what the public education system was designed for. But our people are not the same. So, and
Yeah.
our factories aren't the same either. We're manufacturing things more with robots, and we need to gear our workforce more towards that way. I think with a little bit more reform, we could use the education system like it was designed for, to churn out workers, but a different kind of worker, and a more intelligent worker, a more empathetic worker, because that's part of the reason why we need to teach history, is because so sometimes we can have empathy in our dealings with, especially with geopolitics.
Well, there are ways I think we can do that. I think with all the negatives that COVID brought, uh, one thing that it did was make parents aware of what was being taught in the public school or what was not being taught in the public school. And it has awakened them to seek alternatives. So more and more parents are not only going to the traditional home school, but they're forming micro schools in the community. They're forming what they call community schools. They are looking more into charter schools. I have some experience with that with my own children. Um, when I when my children were fairly young, they were in private school, and my oldest wasn't very happy with it. She was a real firebrand who was very outspoken, let's say, and who wanted answers to things, and she wasn't being given the answers. So she wanted to go to a public school that had this special program for gifted children. And I had a lot of trouble getting her into it because it isn't easy to switch when you're in a private school to get. But I got her into it, and that spurred her into eventually going to one of the most competitive high schools in the country. My other child was very different. He was a lot more sensitive and quiet. And for him, I found a school that, again, another experimental program, which is way back. We're talking about the late 80s and early 90s. And it, in my particular school district, they were experimenting with what they called magnet schools that were geared to certain interests that a child might have in addition to the regular program. So my son got enrolled, and again, I had a lot of trouble getting him in, but I kept at it, into a school that was called the School of the Arts, in which he was allowed to do strings, take music. He had a computer lab where he was introduced to simple computer programming. They also offered dance. They offered art, drawing. So he had all of that in addition to the regular curriculum, which is great because if a kid has a passion for something, they're going to be a lot more likely to succeed in school if, as a part of their learning, they're able to nurture whatever that passion is. And he went on to a very small high school, the same type of program in high school, which only had 400 students, which in a large city, that was tiny. My daughter's high school, for instance, had 2,800. So he was able to go to the school where the teachers were so in tune with the kids that if the child was absent, the parent would get a call. Your child wasn't in school today. But they used cooperative learning, and the kids did hands-on problem solving. So in the history class, they would take a document and they would work in groups. They would analyze different aspects of the document, and then they would come together and form conclusions. They even went so far as to have the students involved in some of the administrative decisions. So when they hired new teachers, of course, we're talking about high school level. There was one student who was a representative of the school interviewing the candidates as well as a parent advocate. So it was a very kind of cutting edge program at the time, and it was partially sponsored by Bill Gates at the time, who was interested in finding learning alternatives. He was went on to all different other things, but that it was a partnership between private money and the public school system, but a different way to address different styles of learning and different needs. And I think we need more of that today. So I think
Absolutely.
we need a lot more parent choice. Personally, I think the money should follow the child,
I agree.
and the parents should be able to choose. All of our money is being put into public education. I know I pay enormous taxes for my school district, and I get absolutely nothing from it. None of my children have ever even been in this particular school district. And again, I don't see very much progress from that standardized. I mean, they may have wonderful outside school activities, and that's another thing. A lot of parents mistakenly believe that if they put a child in a homeschool or a community school, that their kids are going to be deprived of all of the. They are entitled to participate in these activities of your local school district, even if they are not enrolled full time. So, that's one objection that a lot of
Yeah,
think.
that's the biggest objection that I have is number one, I'm not an educator. So the patience factor it would take for me to sit down and teach my children or help them learn, that's one of the hurdles that keeps me from doing it. And another one is the social aspect, the socialization that public school gives you. I'm a public school product, but I didn't graduate. I didn't get any further education wise than the eighth grade. So for me, the social aspect of public school was helpful. However, I think I've been trained to think that way by public school educators who say, "Oh, socialization is the most important thing." Well, they're not being
Hmm.
socialized. They're not being socialized really right now. All their work's being done on computers, which is oddly enough having the backwards of intended effect. We're trying to teach them to be smarter with computers, and in essentially we're teaching them that we're taking away. It's kind of like a cause and effect kind of deal. You teach them to work with everything on computers, and they're learning. They're not learning to talk to each other. They do talk
Exactly.
to each other. They talk to each other through a screen, but they don't talk to each other face to face. And when you go into the workplace and you're forced into a physical, not confrontation, but interaction, a social interaction at work, they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to handle themselves. And for me, it's frustrating to watch that. So on one hand, they do need that social aspect, but on the other hand, they're not getting that from public schools either. So I mean, that's very important that we actually, we need to think about that a little bit. Should we take more control of our children's education? I say yes, because
Oh,
I'm one of
definitely.
those parents that I'm all in there. I support my kids 100% at the school. I advocate for them, with them, and I also work on the side of the educators. I don't just go in there guns ablazing, and when I get a phone call from the school, I'm more on the school's. The benefit of the doubt is on the school's side. I because I know my children. So um, but I was going to ask you. You went to New York, obviously, and visited these places, Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty, and the Intrepid. And I wanted to ask you about: have you been to D.C., Washington D.C.?
Yes,
So
many
there is
times.
a ton of stuff down there you could write books on, and
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
have a
interesting
book
stuff.
on Ford's Theater.
Yes, I see that now. Yeah. But what I was thinking is one of the things that they don't teach very often in schools these days is civics class.
No, no. I had civics. I can remember a whole 6 month course in civics, just
I,
plain civics. And
so
yeah, no, that's
If Little Miss History was to make an appearance in Washington D.C. and maybe kind of write up some stuff in her books about civics and our civic duties and stuff like that, maybe that could be a beneficial thing for Little Miss History to write about.
yeah, that would be a lot in one, but I do have a lot of resources on that uh, in some of my teaching videos on YouTube, in on my Pinterest board. I have a very extensive Pinterest board where I collect resources for parents, for teachers on almost everything you can imagine, travel. So I do collect resources. I do have every week, I do these mini 2-minute teacher lessons or supplementary lessons that could be used in a homeschool or could be used just as an interesting activity for kids, could be used as a supplement to the classroom. And I just present them with a resource. I have videos on things like what's the difference between fact and opinion, critical thinking. I have videos about history, and I have some videos that are done by kids about history, which kids find very interesting. Um, so I have a real extensive collection of source material, in addition to what isn't in the books. My blog as well. On my blog, I have all kinds of information for parents, for teachers, and I review books twice a week, uh, from anything from toddler age up to mostly middle grade, some young adult. And I do that every week. I review books on my blog. I've ventured out into so many different areas. I am all over the place, but my newest venture is a peer pressure course, that I put together for parents, an online course in
Yeah.
dealing with peer pressure. So, I try to collect as much as I can that could be useful, uh, whichever way parents need to use it. You know, uh, Pinterest is great if you're just looking for something quick, and the blog is better if you're looking for more information. And the YouTube videos, of course, kids and adults today are very much attracted to video. And again, as you mentioned, the short attention span. So I make sure the videos are not too long. But the other point that you made that I think might be worth discussing is the parents getting involved as early in age as possible. Uh, I think it's so important, even with preschoolers, to develop these basic skills like curiosity. Just asking a kid, I wonder kind of questions when you're walking around the neighborhood or riding in the car. Oh, I wonder what that building was. I wonder who lived there. I wonder what kind of food they ate. I wonder how they dressed. Just, kind of stimulating their curiosity and, helping them find solutions, not doing everything for them. Even the youngest child, you can train them to try to do it themselves. We have a lot of these helicopter parents that hover around the child for every single reason. And, oh, I can't tie my shoe. Oh, well, let me show you how to do it. And then the next time say, well, I showed you how to do that. You can try on your own. Um, Teaching them to be empathetic about other people, and if a child points out, oh, that looks weird, or why is he wearing that funny dress, explaining to them that different people have different customs and it's okay. You are free to do it this way, and they are able to do it another way. Um, and being a good example yourself, we have to watch what we say. It's very easy to show our prejudices, and
Absolutely.
being aware that when we say things like that, we're training our kids to be the same way. So uh,
Well, so
those are some ways.
where can people find these resources?
Well, the best way to find me is to just go to the website, www littlemisshistory.com. And from the website, you can get to all of them because I have clickable links. So you can click on the Pinterest board, you can click on the books and find out
Absolutely.
little snippets about all the books. My blog is on there.
And
The
it's a
YouTube
very well
channel
put
link
together
is on.
website. It's a very well put together website. I'm looking at it right now, littlemisshistory.com. And there you can find all the information about the books, contact information, merchandise. Your blog is there as well. And are all the resources that you had talked about before, are those on your blog?
The resources are, well, a lot of the tips and advice and the book reviews are on the blog mainly.
Okay.
The teaching videos are on YouTube.
Okay, and there's
Uh,
a link. There's also links for your YouTube and your social
right.
media up
Yeah,
there
they're
as
all
well.
clickable links. And there's even a chat link. So if you click on the chat, you can send a direct email.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really neat. Now, you know what? And I've never actually been to New York, so I've got to ask this question. The Intrepid is one of those places that I got to go to. You know, obviously Ellis Island and Statue of Liberty is top of the list as well, but I'm fascinated by the Intrepid. I think this is probably a pretty good place to leave the interview. Would How long did it take to get through the Intrepid?
A whole day.
So was it
And
like
well,
a few
of course,
hours or
yeah, we're taking pictures and looking at everything very, but it is a very interactive place. So on the Intrepid, they have movies of what it was like during World War II. They have models. They have a Lego model of the Intrepid. They have some old equipment from the World War II era. They have a helicopter, a medical helicopter from the Vietnam area that you can actually go climb into and sit in. It's called the Explorium, and the intention is for people to be able to explore. Then, of course, they have the space shuttle. One of the space shuttles is in a
we
bubble on the
actually
deck.
we actually just got back from Houston. We were down in Houston just a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact, and we went to the Johnson Space Center, and they have a Saturn V rocket there, and we went and saw that, and we hung out there for the entire day. That was really really neat. I encourage, if you've never been to the Johnson Space Center, I encourage you to go down there and check it out. It takes a whole day there as well. One place I have not been that I really, really, really want to go to is Kennedy Space Center, which is in Florida, down at Cape Canaveral. They're launching the new Artemis space missions. They just did one in the beginning of 20 or the end of 2023, I believe, and they've got another one scheduled for 2026. So they're going to be sending another rocket up to the moon. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, as a matter of fact, we just got back from seeing some NASA rockets, and they actually have a space shuttle down there too.
And of course, you can see all the planes from World War II. They have on the flight deck, they have samples of all the different aircraft. So World War II is a very interesting period. I have a few books that are work around World War II. I have one on the Iowa, the battleship, and that has a very interesting history. And also, there's one that's not too far from my home because I live in upstate New York. The USS Slater is a destroyer fort, and they maintain it. It's a
Huh.
wonderful experience seeing that.
A- And where is that at?
It's in Albany,
Okay.
on the Hudson River.
Well, I'm gonna have to go check that out. New York's one of those places that I, I haven't been, but I've always wanted to go. One of the things that I wanted to experience was Christmas in New York City. So I'm really wanting to go up there pretty bad.
Used to do that all the time. Haven't been down there in a while now, but. as a kid, yeah, that was always the train trip into the city to see the tree and watch the ice skaters, and of course, look in the store window and see what
Did you
don't do
ever
it
get to go to
anymore.
FAO Schwartz?
Yes, the store windows, it used to be way back, B. Altman's and Saks Fifth Avenue. They recently stopped doing it, but they used to have an unbelievable display in the windows at Christmas time. People would get online just to wait to walk past the windows. You know, a kid's delight, you know.
I got to make it up that way. Well, Barbara, it's been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming by and hanging out with us. And one more time, that's littlemisshistory.com, and you can find all the books there. And there's a link to purchase the books on that website. There's also social media links and
Yes, I
YouTube
have all my.
links, and on the blog there you can find tips, tricks, communications from yourself, and on the YouTube link there's some videos that goes directly to your channel, and you've got some videos on there that's pretty
I've
awesome.
got lots of other channels and a link to some of the podcasts that I've done. What I need to do is to put another link on the website for podcasts because there have been over
Yeah,
60 of them. So
yeah,
we've had some interesting conversations there as well.
absolutely. Well, Barbara, it's been an awesome honor to have you on the podcast, and thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us.
Well, thanks so much for letting me share with your listeners. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Woo!